Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of 5 Minute Gaming News, the show that has a host that is blinding himself with these lights right now. They're so bright. Today in the news, Blumhouse is taking horror to the smaller screen. The studio behind Paranormal Activity, The Purge, and Megan announced the founding of Blumhouse Games, a game studio that will publish and release horror titles across PC, consoles, and mobile devices. According to DualShockers, the game studio, simply called Blumhouse Games, seeks to make horror games on indie budgets, which the studio estimates as under $10 million. And Blumhouse is known for their ability to find and produce horror films and long-lasting horror franchises. So hopefully they'll be able to use their sixth sense to find and produce great indie horror games, which is a huge market. But that's not all. They're also investing in their own original horror titles as well. As of now, the studio team consists of President Zach Wood, who has experience working at Iron Galaxy, who made Rumbleverse and Killer Instinct, Arcane Studios, Prey and Dishonored, and Sony Santa Monica as an external liaison. And then there's Chief Financial Officer Don Seckler, who previously worked at PlayStation's publishing division and was a key member in reforming Sony's indie financing programs during the 2010s. And so then let's circle back to Blumhouse trying to produce indie games on an indie budget, because 10 million, I think, to a lot of people, especially a lot of starting out indie devs, they're like, that's a lot of money, bro. And I think that's because, to start, most indie games are produced for fun by devs. They have a day job or they take on other jobs while they're making their pet project. And so a lot of times you'll see stories about an indie dev or, 5 indie devs who got together, made a game. It might have cost them a total of, $5,000, $10,000, but they did it for fun. They did it because they were friends. Once you leave that zone, costs skyrocket. Once you're out of there, once you're beyond that, as an indie games producer myself, let me tell you, a lot of money gets spent to make indie games that you don't know about or see. That's just the way it is. So while 10 million seems like a lot, if you take that team of 5 who has, an unlimited amount of time to make their game, they can take 5, 6, 7 years to make that game and perfect it and really make it sparkle and shine. Now you're looking at a studio that's like, okay, we have to have a game out in 2 years, so we're going to need to hire 50 people to come in and work on this thing. So now you're paying 50 people every 2 weeks to make this game for 2 years, and that money adds up. Now, combine that with all the other games they're going to do, right? They're not going to just make one game at a time. Those costs add up, and that's going to be that $10 million. The question I have is, what are they going to produce with the $10 million, right? Because indie games can either be blockbuster mega smashes where the dev team or the lead dev or whoever created it becomes a superstar, or it could be a flash in the pan and they don't make their money back. That is the indie gambit, right? We will see. In other news, Avengers. That's me catching the hammer. Apologize. Earlier this week, the creative director at Marvel Avengers support studio straight up apologized for the game. Cesar Virtuoso, or Cesar Virtuoso, which, look, I tried to look it up. I'm sorry, my man. I couldn't find how to pronounce your name. Creative director at Virtuous told Edge magazine it was a challenging production, let's say. And this apology comes just weeks after Crystal Dynamics announced it would no longer support Marvel's Avengers by September of 2023. We know this is disappointing news, as everyone in our community has such a connection to these characters and their stories. We're so grateful that you came on this adventure with us. And that's what's so sad about Marvel's Avengers, because making games isn't easy, and when you have a property like the Avengers and all of the input was coming from all different angles, it couldn't have been easy to make this game. And I'm sure everyone had ideas of how to monetize, which they did. And in the end, I know as a dev, it had to have been heartbreaking, because there are moments where the game's very cool. And then moments where you realize it is entirely designed to make some cash for Square Enix. But even still, in Square Enix's 2021 shareholder report, President and Representative Director Yotsuke Matsuda commented on the issues the game faced during development. We overcame a variety of unexpected difficulties in the final phase of the game's development, including needing to transition to work from home due to the pandemic. We were able to surmount these challenges and release the game, but it has unfortunately not proven as successful as we would have liked. But that's the problem. What they would have liked is to make a lot more money on it great, but no one's gonna buy a game that's very clearly designed to make money. Like, we all understand the end goal of selling a thing is to make money, but when it's obvious, it's insulting. Speaking of 2021 and an arduous game dev process, Psychonauts 2, one of the most talked about games of that year, had its own highs and lows, which you can witness through Double Fine and 2-Player Productions' 22-hour-long documentary titled Double Fine Psychodacy on YouTube. We don't usually get a ton of detailed game development documentation, so this series is not only fun to watch, but it's a pretty significant record for future historians studying the history of games and game development. And hey, you might even learn a thing or two along the way. And if you haven't already, you should have learned by now that this is the time I remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Boy, getting to 1 million would be swell, wouldn't it? For me, anyway. Thanks again, gang. Anyway, I'll see y'all tomorrow for another episode of 5 Minute Gaming News.